The podcast is about OWASP SAMM, obviously, you know about SAMM, but also about CRA, Cyber Resilience Act. And as part of this podcast, we have actually three guests. Some of them you already may know. We have Nessim, who is part, who has actually contributed already quite some time towards the SAMM project. Maybe Nessim, can you do a very short introduction for yourself?
Yeah, I'm probably a lapsed member of the team. I was quite involved around, I guess, the SAMM 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
I work on application security. Been working for the last 20 something years around there. Anything to do with either low level in the trenches or slightly higher level at an SDLC level. Um,
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you and welcome to this podcast. We also have Lara. We should have started with you, actually.
Lara here, marginally, like one legal lawyer researching the CRA and have done research with SAMM. So that's why we can see the concurrences between them from a legal standpoint. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. And you work currently with Codific, if I'm not mistaken.
yes, yes.
Yes.
And
Oh, great. Fantastic. And then we also have Maxime from the core team.
So yeah, background in system engineering with SAMM core team for 5 or 6 years now. I think 5 years. These days working for Torion, mostly on the SDLC side, helping organizations implement security development practices, either with a link to these days the Cyber Resilience Act or OT security, operational technology. And I'm following up on the Cyber Resilience Act for quite a while now. So really, like, I would say it's one of my main focuses at the moment.
Yes, I know. I've already heard you and see you speaking on CRA quite a lot. Now, we have a couple of questions prepared, but also I think we will take about half an hour to go over this topic and do a little bit of a deep dive. I'm going to assume that most of the people that are going to watch this podcast or listen to this podcast already have some kind of idea what CRA is, and we're not going to do like a CRA 101. But if you come across a product team and you need to explain CRA in a very like on a very short elevator ride or in a one sentence, for each of you, very shortly, what does CRA mean for a product team? And maybe let's start. Maybe let's start a little bit with the legal background, Lara.
what I would tell them, and again, I'm not technical from a legal standpoint. I would say this is the first time the cybersecurity, so that software is being regulated as a product. So the cybersecurity of products is being regulated to this extent, and this hasn't happened before. So a big
No,
change.
big change indeed, indeed. Um, Nessim, but what's your take on this? Because, well, maybe the product team has heard from legal that they need to do something about this. They come to you. What does it mean?
I'd say, yeah, the CRA is probably product scoped or targeted legislation. So it's aimed indeed at products. And in a nutshell, what it's aiming to do is really force you, if you're trying to place a product on the European market, to make sure that it includes what I think probably most of us here would consider reasonable cybersecurity baselines. And so you've got to include them, and you have to be able to demonstrate that if they ask you for it. And I would say it lists a bunch of things that SAMM pretty much covers, which is why anyone doing decent, reasonable cybersecurity would typically probably be compliant. Well, I won't say be compliant, but is doing the right thing. Then you have to be able to demonstrate it. And then the other little bit
Hmm.
that also comes with it is you need to be able to be a responsible, I suppose, netizen, citizen, where if there are vulnerabilities that you're aware of, you need to be able to handle those in a reasonable way for a particular period. As long as that product is supported, and that also forces you to support it for a particular period, you need to be able to make sure that those vulnerabilities are addressed. It's really pretty pragmatic, is what it's aiming for. And so really just ideally it's something that we would all do ourselves, but since we don't seem to be doing that, the EU society is going to force us to try and or force manufacturers to try and do it. But otherwise, pragmatic best practices for security is what I would say.
Okay, and maybe Maxime, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe
know.
also specify. Sorry to interrupt you. I would say a product team might also have like this basic question. Okay, but do we need are our products in scope for this? Do we need to do this for everything?
Yeah, every product with that basically runs software that's more than just a single control loop, and it has a potential to be network connected would be in scope. And come back to the one single sentence. It's kind of like a recap of already what Lara and Nassim mentioned, and that's there's now a minimum level of cybersecurity mandated for products that are going to enter the European market. And as Lara said, it's the first time, as Nassim said, it goes a little bit beyond that single sentence, but I guess that should wake him up.
All right, good. Let's do get a little bit further here. Now I'm thinking, for instance, if I would be a product owner or like I'm in a product team, what are like the minimum set of security activities that we need to consider or to check to become CRA compliant? Anyone else? Anyone of you who wants to start with this? Nassim?
Yep, I can. Well, I would say minimum set of the CRA. I suppose one way of understanding it. I'm sorry if I go off slightly. It's essentially it's risk driven. So it's again similar to SAMM for those who are risk based. So the idea
Okay.
really is you start off with a risk assessment of your product. Risk assessment. The CRA has in an annex what they call the essential requirements. So it's a whole long list of things that this, it's in the name, essential requirements. These are requirements that you have to comply with, things like secure by design. So that's one of those. So then the idea is that you'll do your risk assessment. Your risk assessment will identify a bunch of risks in your product, potentially. And then based on those, you'll get to say, okay, if I have to do secure by design, if I have to do whatever data minimization, if I have to do vulnerability handling, how far I know I have to do them. Those are non-negotiable as long as they apply. Obviously, if there's no notion of a remote update, my software can't be done, then that's out of scope. But anything that is in scope, I have to do. And the question is just to what extent do I have to go to be able, or how far should I go in doing those and in demonstrating that I've done them? And it may be testing those things. That's essentially it. So I would say at the core somewhere, you've definitely got that whole risk assessment because that informs everything. And then obviously secure design is at the heart of a lot of things. If you're able to design something fairly securely, you minimize all sorts of impacts are minimized. So potentially you don't have to do a lot. Your risk is generally maybe more under control. And then the one thing that you also do have to do as an obligation is the whole vulnerability handling. So you probably need to have activities around and processes around handling vulnerabilities.
Yes. So it's not only when you develop your product, but also when you operate your product. So that during the whole life cycle of your product, you need to be able to handle vulnerabilities for your customer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Maxime, anything to add to that from a technical point of view before I go to Lara to maybe discuss legal implications?
I think this is one of the we did mappings with the core team, and in a way we ended up with two distinct mappings. One that's really trying to aim for a target, compliance target, and one that aims to cover every single aspect, kind of like a flavor of SAMM. So I find it hard to answer because I'm partial to the SAMM flavor, and asking in context of every company, every organization should decide based on risk again what they're going to do and to what extent. Now, I think at least every company would have to do this risk analysis. Since you're reviewing also security architecture, I think threat modeling would be in there and security requirements. So these three at the very absolute minimum are covered. And everything around vulnerability handling, knowing what's in your product, such as so we have third-party components in implementation stream B, so SBOMs basically.
Mhm.
And then the processes around instant detection, instant response, these are there. But also a little bit outside of SAMM, what is the minimum set of security activities? Some are worth mentioning. That not every activity is per se a SAMM activity or at least even a security activity, because there's now this aspect of potentially an external party that's going to come and check if you did your best, you did your due diligence. Doing things to a certain degree of formality is extremely important. So when you're doing it, it's not just okay to do this with if you're a small team, just everyone's doing their best and you're tight knit. Some stuff doesn't have to be properly documented or put into a process because everyone knows it. Well, even in this scenario now, you will have to have some form of a secure development policy. You will need to have a vulnerability handling policy, like this process that covers the activities that you're doing, because you need to prove that you're doing this in a formal way.
Okay.
So I think that's one thing that's often overlooked now.
That's probably going to change or have quite some impact on a lot of teams.
Yes.
Maybe we can there make that bridge also to Lara and so how far do we need to go with this formalism? And also, what if we don't want to do this? Are there any implications of ignoring this?
Yes, I think Maxim put it perfectly. One of the main differences, because of the route that the CRA, so that the legislative ideation behind the CRA chose is a risk assessment based, as Nissim very well put. So in this, for you to, for example, this is Annex 1, Part 1 of the Act. So when you look at the technical requirements, again, as Nissim said, they're risk-based. But so you have to have a risk assessment documented because one of the main changes in the cybersecurity landscape because of the Act, as Maxim just said, now an authority can come into your team and said, show me everything that you've got. And they have a right to do so based on the Act. This is why, if I would summarize the legal need, it would be document everything you can as in as much detail as you can. Sometimes, speaking as an in-house lawyer, sometimes you do not want to document everything, but then this is up for your legal team to decide. Then, at least from a technical perspective, document as much as you can, and not just document it technically, but be mindful of the fact that an authority that might not necessarily know as much as you do about the product, know as much as you do about cybersecurity, will come and review everything. So be mindful of this audience that will likely or is there's a possibility that they will go through your documentation. So be mindful of that. So yeah, from a legal perspective, I think the minimum set of, I wouldn't call them security activities, but these requirements would be the risk assessment documented very well because it obeys the ideation behind your compliance with the technical requirements, but also have policies, vulnerability handling policies, reporting, how are you going to report to ENISA, how are you going to report to authorities in case of an incident, because the technical teams might not be aware of where to send things to, whom to contact. This is a personal note, I would take a look at cybersecurity insurances as well and civil liability insurance. I mean, if you want to be as safe as possible, that's also an idea. But yeah, this would be my notes.
That's going to be a certain shift. That's going to be a big change for a lot of organizations. I can imagine that organizations that are already security savvy or have a high risk profile have already done a lot of this. But a lot of organizations that are just maybe in manufacturing or in IoT this is going to have a really big impact on their way of working.
Could I add one more thing to all of that, Siva?
Yes, of course. That's why we're
Um,
here.
Thank you. I think one of the things, and obviously what Lara said and what Maxima said are completely true and accurate there. One thing I think we should probably also throw out is that although we might know a certain amount and we might have spent a while looking at the CRA, the honest truth is also that technically nobody really knows. So we would say, Lara was saying, document as much as you can, etc. Questions that would come up are, okay, to what extent should I document something? You know, what constitutes a reasonable, if I'm rating risks and I'm saying this is a medium risk, against what? If I might do that as a manufacturer, but how can I then convince whoever's auditing me? So it could be something like these conformity, market surveillance authorities. There are various bodies in under the CRA that would potentially come and ask you to show these things. That kind of guidance to how far should I go? How should I structure my risk assessment? How can I, structure my risks? How can I rate them? What kind of factors can I consider? All of these things, those aren't really clear yet. So we're waiting on these. There's guidance that is being issued by various European standardization organizations, so SEN, CENELEC, ETSI, etc. ENISA is also involved as the Agency for Cybersecurity. And the idea is that they're supposed to come out with guidance that clarifies a little bit. We know where it's going. We're not sure where we cut things off. And the other thing that you hear quite a bit is that the intention of the CRA, I think, is to try and be pragmatic, because obviously it applies to SMEs, to micro enterprises, and the idea is clearly not to penalize them, because otherwise we set European manufacturers at a disadvantage. So it's trying to keep it pragmatic, and so there's that balancing between how do you do a pragmatic risk assessment, as you said, someone who's in manufacturing who's not at all a cyber person. They've never heard of a risk assessment potentially. They still need to produce one. The legislation doesn't necessarily want to slow them down or penalize them. It wants them to approach it in a pragmatic way. And finding those lines of what is enough, what is not too much, what is exaggerating, those are not clear yet. We'll know that at some point. So some of the guidance will come out this year. I mean, Maximo probably knows better. Somewhere around this year, middle of the year, next year. So it cuts it a little close, but we honestly we don't know a lot of the details.
Yeah, that's quite close, because since, if I'm not mistaken, there's a couple of deadlines involved here that are this year. Like I think it's around August, September timeframe that we need to be able to report on vulnerabilities that are exploited in the wild. That's for one. So we need to at least know to whom and how within wherever you are within Europe, or however, which kind of authority you need to involve. And then by already end of next year, we need to be able to do this for this security by design and implementing security requirements for any new product that we put on the market end of next year. And well, it's a physical product that has, those have different kind of like sprint timetables than we have like with regular software. So it can, okay, well.
It's challenging, yeah.
Challenging, but obviously SAMM to the rescue. Why? So, and that's also obviously why we chose this topic, and also for people who are listening to this and thinking that this is only for organizations that are in Europe. No, this is for every manufacturer that wants to market their product in Europe, and so Europe is still a very big market. So how is OWASP SAMM a good fit for this readiness? Where can we use SAMM? But also, I can imagine that SAMM is probably not like the silver bullet, that there's a couple of things that are missing where we should maybe cater for extra coverage. I think I'm going to ask this first to Maxime, because he's part of the core team. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I already unmuted because this is
I know.
SAMM is an excellent fit because it brings you the ability to oversee the work that needs to be done. So if we look, for example, at the legislation, if we look at the standards that are being developed, they tell the what needs to be done by what date. But the road towards that what is often challenging. And I give the example, if you're even introducing a single activity, you're doing the security scanning for the first time on a decent code base, you're going to be confronted with a bunch of stuff that you now need to triage and fit and find out what to do with. And SAMM gives you the ability to build a product security strategy and implement all of those things, and partially bridges the gap also on a detail level between what needs to be done and how to do it. So doing just SAMM will get you part of the way towards full compliance, and could be picked up by non-security people. Doing just the standards is going to, at this point in time, you're going to need like expert hand-holding in order to get there. So I think the main benefit is product security strategy, or security strategy in general, with a focus on development. I keep saying product security. SAMM in essence is a software assurance maturity model, and I think that's one of the poorest fits out of the box at the moment. In essence, it is still a software assurance maturity model, and so it needs interpretation when someone else is going to actually do the operations part, and that is stuff that it's lacking at the moment. The other thing that fits a little bit poorly now is the extent to which the CRA asks you to do vulnerability handling, responsible disclosure. This is more on organizational level. I would say it's a level higher than just product development, but it has, of course, it has a big link with your SDLC. So there's a mix of organizational level controls, to which the security development process is one, but also vulnerability handling, and a mix of technical product controls, which I would say is partially covered by SAMM. But yeah.
Okay. Maxime, Nessim, anything from your end?
No, I think Maxime was indeed well placed to cover that. I think from my perspective, it does really well. You have both those essential requirements of the CRA are in SAMM. They're there, as Maxime said. CRA doesn't tell you how to go about doing them. SAMM gives you a nice as-is to be roadmap. You can see it's not explicit, I suppose, yet which activities are foundational, which ones are enablers of other ones, but it's getting there. It gets there. It figures it out. It's all risk-based. You don't have to do everything. I would say one of the things maybe scope-wise, where CRA is very much product scoped, and a SAMM is pretty open. You can apply whatever scope you want. So you might apply SAMM assessment to a product, to a team, to an organization. So I would say if you are using SAMM, and it's a great way of seeing what should I do, where should I be going, where am I heading to, how do I prioritize things? So really, really good for that. Making sure that since SAMM, also we have the light and the more in-depth flavor, CRA does want you to document all these things, be able to show them, which you don't necessarily have to do with SAMM, and it doesn't necessarily show to what level you might need to go to be. So those little things are making sure that if you are doing something more maybe not at a product scope, but at an organization or a team, that anything that comes out of SAMM, you are able to still rescope to the product. So in terms of, I think, assessments, making sure you take good notes and that you know where something no longer applies at a product level, but is maybe at a different scope.
Yeah. All right. Lara, anything from your end?
Just one small note. Whenever reasonable law is made, because we can have unreasonable law, but whenever reasonable law is drafted, you're not creating.
Oh, Lara,
sorry.
Yes.
You're not. I clicked here. Sorry. But you're not creating any non-existent obligations. You are formalizing practices that already existed, and they are ideal. And fortunately for SAMM, SAMM is the ideal practice in terms of application cybersecurity, and in the sense that no one is reinventing the cybersecurity wheel. The CRA is not reinventing practices. So you already know the best practices. You're just formalizing them, and now they're an obligation. So if you're familiar with the link, you're familiar with them, or you design products to operate your team based on these practices, you're very well off already. So this is the small note.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then I think there's a couple of follow-up questions here. We've talked a high level about what if SAMM is a good fit, but I can imagine that within SAMM there's a couple of practices that have the most impact. Security, so the risk assessment has been mentioned. So I can imagine maybe Maxime that you're going to come up with threat assessment as the best fit. No?
If you ask me, I think threat modeling is indeed specifically threat modeling is the one practice that I would say has the most impact. If we're looking at not teams of any maturity, if you're going to start doing threat modeling, you're already doing some form, like input for threat modeling partially is this high-level risk assessment that the CRA expects of you. So you're doing risk assessment. You're producing security-relevant or security-oriented architecture documentation, which needs to be part of your technical dossier for the CE conformity. You're already looking at security requirements, and you're able to select which ones might apply tied to a risk that you identified, how far you would want to go. And so you're already producing a lot of very relevant things for the CRA even before you're going to implementation. So I think that is the one practice that has that would have from all of SAMM would have the biggest impact. But I'm happy to hear what others find.
Well, it was written in the plural, so practices. It is very hard to pick just the one. I think Maxime's got a pretty good candidate there. Would it be that? I think if you're focusing on software, obviously one of the things we maybe get, Maxime mentioned it earlier on, we get hung up on, but we focus on quite a bit is the whole thing of SBOMs, especially anyone who works in development and knows. If you write a Node application, you see the thousands of dependencies that get pulled in, and all of a sudden, especially if you're working with open source ones, and you realize, I'm responsible for all of this, or at least the security of my project. So then, in terms of SAMM, I suppose you come down to kind of secure build where the whole software dependencies, etc. I think is a big one.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, one of the interesting ones is maybe, anything design, but is maybe where are we? If you do things like this is kind of I think that there is a distinction maybe between new developments where you can afford to start off being essentially CRA compliant, and then legacy stuff where you really are hampered. But ideally, if you could sort of show so the whole requirements-driven testing or any of those kinds of things in SAMM where you can demonstrate that you are free of vulnerabilities or you're not impacted by something. That's pretty powerful if you're trying to show rather than document, and it's also rather than argue something, you're able to just run a suite and say, this vulnerability doesn't actually impact me. I have tests that run and that can show me clearly not impacted. So I don't have to convince someone whether or not I need to address it because it's already mitigated by something else. So that's also an interesting one, but essentially the whole of SAMM, just do them.
Okay. All right. Lara, any additions from your end here?
Listen to the two of them. That's my input.
All right. This brings me to the end of the questions that we prepared, and also we're half an hour in. So maybe let's try to wrap this up and come up with what would be the couple of resources pointing that you would point to for any team that listens, or anyone who listens to this podcast and say, okay, I want to take this a step further and make this actionable. There's quite some resources out there. You have the SAMM resources, but anything else? I think
honestly, start with the legislation. If you don't care to read all of it, and I understand this, look at Annex 1, which is the technical security requirements. and then is it Annex 7 with the contents of the technical documentation? Because if you look there, you're basically seeing what outcomes are required of you, what they're asking, what you need to deliver, and you can work your way back from there based on what you need to do.
Okay.
That's at the moment it's the most authoritative source to start with. Once you have understand that, then you can look at other stuff, but please don't start with random blog posts or ask ChatGPT. It's
No, I
yeah,
would
I
not
see Lara like no,
recommend
don't.
this.
So,
Don't.
yeah.
I remember having come across some early guidance from BSI from Germany
Yeah.
that is a little bit on the forefront of this. Is that something that we can rely on?
So yes, and kudos to the BSI. They were the first ones to stick their neck out and publish guidance even before standardization was properly happening, even before like everyone was still looking at each other. And some of the guidance was a bit polarizing, I think. They got a lot of flack for it too. But they're making an update on this, and the goal is that this guidance indeed also fills this gap between the detail level in the legislation and the standards and what you actually need to do. So yes, that's an excellent source. It's the TR03183 from the PSI. And yeah, again, authoritative sources. The standards that are being worked on by SAMM and ECTSI have public consultations. At the moment, the SAMM 40,000-3 is open for public comments, which is the one on vulnerability handling. We just, back in December, the first public consultation for the other two horizontal ones closed. And if you have a product in the critical category, or important or critical categories via stand4cra.eu, you can access the draft standards for specific products in the important or critical categories. So those are absolutely also important resources. Again, authoritative resources.
All right. Okay, great.
I
Nassim?
would say, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think Dan did a good job there, Maxime. For the BSI, it's an interesting one, huh? Because on some of them, for example, they have TR documents, technical recommendation on all sorts of on a few different topics, risk assessments, SBOMs, and they're very concrete. I really like them. It's interesting. So I think I've heard them described as kind of aspirational, a few of these, because they go a bit further than the CRA requires you to go. They make it concrete. They say, look, the CRA doesn't tell you much about what should go into your SBOM. So the BSI decides, yes, we will give you very specific things that go into the SBOMs. They've even got profiles for things like Cyclone DX if you're into OWASP. So they really get concrete. And they probably go further than you strictly need to. And I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to push a little the standards and vendors towards where we'd like it to be really useful. But strictly speaking, to be CRA compliant, you wouldn't have to go that far.
Yeah.
Maybe, but indeed, really good resource and really practical. And maybe a last one I'll throw out is from the whole, and I think also why you should try and stick to the authoritative resources, because there's a lot of confusion. Nobody really knows. Even those who stare at the original sources still don't really know what to expect, because it's just not there yet. But things like from a especially if you're into the open source, any of the FOSS things, there's CRA Hub. Is a project I think from the Eclipse Foundation where they're trying to essentially. Sorry, go ahead, Maxime.
No, that's the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, I think you mean, which has a subsection CRA Hub. It's from Eclipse. ORCWG. Yes.
Indeed, yeah.
Absolutely.
And they try to answer a lot of questions so you get some quite high profile, but I think the handful of people in the FOSS world who understand both FOSS and CRA, and they're trying to essentially answer questions, and they have a reasonably good channel to the commission and the CRA people, so they're able to also get feedback that way, and that's definitely a good place. They've got a really nice FAQ that goes through a process of curating answers, etc. So rather than Google and trust ChatGPT, have a look and see if it's in there. Submit it, join it if you can.
Absolutely. put a link to the
Perfect.
yeah, put a link
Yes,
in
yeah,
the
we'll
description. Thank you, Nassim.
definitely add these resources to the recording descriptions. Lara, anything else that Nassim or Maxim have missed?
Listen to them. Listen to them. Access the websites, access the links.
Yes. Well, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So, Lara, Nassim, Maxim, thank you very much for your insights. I'm pretty sure this is not the last time that we're going to discuss this in a podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that bell to get notifications if you're into that. And make sure to follow any of our channels for upcoming events. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the podcast. We have the different channels that you can reach us through. This Slack channel, meetups, I would say for as long as it lasts, because it could be that we're going to discontinue that. But to make sure that you get updates, you have the YouTube channel, but also make sure to register yourself for our newsletter. With that, I'm at the end and I'd like to thank you very much